All right. You guys ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yep.
Okay. So, welcome everyone to Taking a Break, episode 6 with Detroit Speed. So, we're doing something a little different this time. Kyle and Mark Stielow go way back. So, we're going to pretty much, I have a couple questions to ask them, but we're pretty much just going to let them, reminisce on the good old days and how pro touring started out. So, I'll go ahead and just read off the first one, which is going to be kind of the basis of conversation here for you guys. So, someone on Instagram, his name is Tracy, he said, please have one of the things discussed be the origin of the name Pro Touring. What is the definition so we can finally put a nail in that coffin? So he just wants to know, what is Pro Touring? How did it start? And kind of what is the backstory behind that name? I know you guys pretty much had everything to do with it. So let's hear it.
Mark, you go ahead, because I remember it was between you and Jeff Smith, and I remember it was like the 97 issue of Chevy High when we had some renderings in there of the current cars going together, right?
Yeah, it was April 1998 in Chevy High. I was starting to do a story on the building of the Thrasher, and kind of on the kickoff story, I was kind of thinking about we should name this. Well, if you back up to the previous year, I was at SEMA, and there was this big poster, and it said, "A yet unnamed phenomena." And then as I was doing this story, I decided to coin the term Pro Touring. And Jeff Smith put it in print. There's a rendering of your car Twister in there. There's a rendering of my car. So that's where it started.
So that flows off the tongue a little better than overpriced muscle cars, right? With modern technology in it. Pro Touring just kind of fits it better.
Well, it was kind of a Hot Rod Power Tour was starting to be, it had been going on for about 5 years at that time. So, I thought, kind of a touring car, and then, Pro Street. So it kind of morphed into Pro Touring.
Yeah. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, it was more kind of a car that, you could harden it to do things like Power Tour, open track events, and things like that. So, there's kind of two genres out there. There's resto mods and there's Pro Touring, and they're blurred. The lines are pretty blurry between the two.
Well, also is maybe some of our memory of what I remember the parts, we had available, and that's really what got you and I together was parts were just not there to build what you were building and the ideas you had. And same for me when I was trying to do things, they weren't there. We knew how we wanted the car to function, but the industry wasn't there to really put the parts behind it yet. So that's really what you had, a TIG welder in the Bridgeport. I had a TIG welder in the Bridgeport, and that's kind of how things got started, right?
Yeah, that and the Sawzall, and you can get a lot of stuff done. So, yeah, we were trying to, I was trying to build a car to run one lap of America in 1993, and that was just, it needed better brakes, it needed better chassis, and, there's the article right there. So, we had to build our own spindles. We had we upper control arm modifications and all that stuff. So we'd started just making parts and making it happen.
And that was really, after you and I met, which was back in engineering school in Missouri. Mark and I are both Midwest guys, Missouri guys, and we met at University of Missouri-Rolla. And at the time, we had a great steward, Chuck Hughes, that Mark introduced me to, and that was really an opening door for you at the time, right, Mark, to GM, and the same for me as a college co-op student.
Yeah, I mean, both Kyle and I were team captains in our Formula SAE car, and when I got to Detroit as a summer intern, I pulled all the blueprints for a '69 Camaro, and I dropped them into the suspension programs that we had to kind of look at stuff pretty crude, and it was just not right. So, we kind of quickly figured out from the stuff we'd learned doing design in Formula SAE cars, like I designed a taller spindle, and actually I came back down to Rolla and had Niall Castle weld the spindles back together again. And that's where a taller spindle came, and we changed the upper control arm and all that stuff.
Yeah, I remember that. And that was, you were driving a '69, a really nice '69 Camaro at the time that later got crashed, but you were building what was one of the first Camaros you were known for too, right? Publicly.
Yeah.
At Niall's place.
Yeah, I bought a '69 Camaro in Mesa, Arizona as a new hire at GM. And then because I knew Nile Castle in Rolla, Missouri, I drug it down there to get the roll cage put in it. And that car was being prepped to race one lap of America in 1993. And I suckered you into going with me. Yeah, there's the car. So that car got drug off of Indian reservation in Mesa, Arizona. And those are actually shots down at Nile, where the cage was down at Race Car Engineering in Rolla, Missouri. But yeah, so Kyle and I did.
Yeah, that's right. So
we did it together. So,
but that's really how it started. We kind of met instead of doing homework. I guess we got through engineering school and did all right in mechanical engineering, but we met through SAE, Society of Automotive Engineers, which we were heavily involved in, and then captains on the Formula SAE team, which is still a great program and produces a lot of gearheads and gives gearheads something to do while at engineering school too. So great programs, and that's kind of how Mark and I met. And the picture there we had that first car up in the upper left-hand corner, Alex, that picture was kind of the start of the Royal Oak garage. There is where that picture was. I recognized the garage, I believe, when we were both in Royal Oak living and working at GM.
So is that tri-tip? Is that what came to be tri-tip?
Yep, that car became tri-tip, and that garage was a 20 by 20 uninsulated garage that we built that car in. Yeah, you can see kind of inside the shop there.
Yeah.
So
had a roll-up garage door, and Bud Light bottles would usually roll out underneath when we got in there the next morning. But we designed and made and trashed a lot of parts in there for dreaming up 69 Camaro parts.
Were you there that night we fired it up, open header, 427 with no carburetor on it?
Yes, I was there. I remember one day, and I didn't have a fuel tank in it, but we got it home and decided, yeah, we can probably get this running tonight before work tomorrow morning. And either you or I were holding the fuel jug, and one was in there jockeying the throttle. When we got it, it surprised us when it fired up, and it was well after midnight. Yeah, open header, big block with a 5-gallon gas jug going right into the carburetor.
Yeah, our neighbors weren't our biggest fans.
We never did get invited over to any barbecues or anything there.
No.
Those kind of stories usually turn into YouTube videos nowadays.
Yeah.
Big fires.
YouTube. Yeah.
Yeah, luckily we didn't have cell phones to document a lot of that, but there were a lot of stories around that little Royal Oak garage when we got started and working on Mark's cars, and that especially tri-tip. I mean, when it came out with your everything you did, through one lap of America, and when we ran it, and then caught it on fire, and did everything we did with it that summer. What was that? The summer of '91, I believe, right?
That was 1993. And
was it? Okay.
The great story about this picture is Kyle was driving the car at Michigan International Speedway when the fuel line pulled off. No fault of Kyle's, and the car caught on fire. They put the car out, and we brought the car back to my house, stripped it down. I had to fly back out to California because I was working for GM Racing at the time. Took it to the body shop, got it repainted. Kyle got the car put back together again, and 3 weeks later, we had that car on the cover of CarCraft. Was that about right?
Yeah, well, we drove it from Detroit down to St. Louis, right? St. Louis International. And you won CarCraft Real Street Eliminator for it. We celebrated at Hooters that night and drove all night back so we could be back at work the next morning.
Yep. And you woke me up about 200 miles outside of Detroit and said that the brake line went out, and I asked how much fuel was left in the car, and you said 3/4 of a tank. I said, wake me up when we get closer. So
yeah, I remember we did, no kidding. The sun was coming up, and we hit Detroit, 696 traffic, right?
Yep.
Going to work Monday morning, and I had no brakes. I was downshifting in Monday morning traffic, but we got it there. We didn't need to crash it again and catch it on fire. But the funny part about Michigan International was when I caught it on fire, I look up in the rearview mirror coming down off like the NASCAR 4, and we were going fast. And anyway, I look up and I see flames in the rearview mirror, and I did a double take, like something doesn't look right, when you first look at it. So I get down to the starting line because on one lap, you start from a standing stop. So I get ready to take off, and again, there's flames there, and people are running at me with fire extinguishers. So I get out of the car. I think it was still running. I get out of the car and start running towards the pits, and I pass Mark. He's running towards the car. I'm like, man, don't go there. It's on fire. So Mark was trying to save his car that I caught on fire.
All I could think about was all the credit card debt I still had on that car, and it was on fire.
No, we had a successful one lap that year. It was fun because, I mean, 3 punk kids really from the Midwest taking a hot rod Camaro on that probably went way too fast for what it was at the time on some of those tracks. And, they grid on one lap of America, they grid you on the starting line based on your previous performance, right, Mark? From the previous day of running, elapsed time or times on the road course. So we show up and do the drivers meeting and the kickoff party, and we take off and like all giddy and full of energy. And they gridded us pretty far back because, again, just 3 punk kids in a hot rod Camaro. And you started driving. Yeah, I remember you were driving first and started bringing us up in the grid. Pretty far up. Each time you drove, you were bringing us up, and we were down in the 30s or 40s up into the 20s, and then pretty soon we cracked the top 10 grid. And then and it was a stiff field that year. I remember Dodge had a factory back with Elliott Forbes Robinson driving, and there was some good drivers. And then we won overall at Loudon, New Hampshire. And then everybody started taking us serious after that when the kids won the Camaro at Loudon. So it was really a cool year.
Yeah, it was every time we'd leave the track, there'd be a new noise in that car. I mean, just everything got loose and started moving around. So we're lucky we survived that. So
no, you're right. We broke that car several times that year.
Yeah, that was a fun trip. Oh well.
But yeah, that's Tri-Tip, which is now locally. It's back in North Carolina. Steve Rupp has it now, and I think he'll be a good steward for that car. Jeff Hayasaka had it for a long time, and we did a few updates on it. But yeah, I mean, that picture is the BFG poster of Mark's car on Ronald's there was really cool. And I remember you were on a trip, I think, Mark, and you said they had to get the car picked up, and they picked the car up and they water painted it, right, for that poster, that turquoise color.
Yeah, when I walked into the studio, the car was sitting about 5 feet off the ground on pedestals, and they had painted half the car with water-based paint that would strip off. So you walked in, the car's sitting there in the air, and you walked to the other side of it, and it was still white. And for years later, I still found that turquoise paint in the trunk when they stripped the paint back off of it. So that's not Photoshop. They actually painted half the car that color.
That's crazy. I would not have guessed that because, like you said, normally nowadays that's a Photoshop
right,
function.
You would think
they wouldn't
so.
Actually paint a car.
Not back then.
No, wow. You walked in and it looked just like that, and it was floating about 5 feet off the ground. And I was like, holy crap! So yeah, that was a fun one. Then
I mean,
what's that?
Between the early Camaros, though, like between you and the white car, the Tri-Tip, to the Gottlieb car, the '69 Camaro sitting down with big brakes, big wheels and tires, it was a new look and new phenomena, right? And it was just the right time for a car like that, and it did. It on one lap of America, you backed it up more than once in that car that it was built to function and could drive on the street and capable of some really quick times on the road courses too.
Well, back in that time frame, the OE offerings weren't that strong, and I mean a roller cam 400 small block with a 6-speed with big brakes on it was a pretty formidable package. I mean, it ran pretty strong, and that was I learned a ton. The cars were, that's really how you develop cars and parts: is you run them, you break them, you fix them, and you run them, you break them, you fix them, which is kind of how your company's been based, the whole time it's been around.
Yeah, that's right.
So I want to get to a couple questions that we have some of the people in the live chat that they're asking. So this will be an interesting one that could spark a conversation with you guys. This is from Jeff Ottinger. Mark, he says he's a big fan of your work, and he wants to know, with hybrid cars becoming more and more popular, will we ever see a hybrid Camaro from you?
I would never say never. I mean, the stuff I'm working on right now, my day job, I work for General Motors, and I work in vehicle dynamics. And we're working on some pre-production stuff now that's pretty amazing. And I've had a chance to drive some Teslas, and I've seen some work being done on the electric stuff. So once the batteries and power delivery get squared away, it's pretty simple, but kind of complicated from a mechanical engineering point of view. But I think I see electrics being a big part of the future. And probably not a hybrid. It'll probably be pure electric, because running IC engines and hybrid is complicated, but doing IC engine with a all-wheel drive or something like that is much more palatable. Or doing all electric.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's that far off. And you and I have talked about it previously that it will happen, and we've kicked around the idea a few times already. Yeah,
so the battery technology is changing, every 6 months. A lot. With all the OEs getting in hard, there's going to be some big technological step functions coming in the near future.
Yeah.
But be careful of the big orange wires. That's
So another question here from Joe Davis, and this one's for Mark. He wants to know, can you compare the LT versus the LS for installation in our subframe? I know you have experience with the green car you just recently finished, and what you're working on now as well with the LT5. How does that compare to the LS as far as installation goes?
It's a little bit like when the LSs first came out. They were hard, and the aftermarket really wasn't all the way there yet. I did an LS7 car back in 2006 or 7, I forget the exact year, but it was relatively new. Getting the accessory drive squared away and all that stuff was a little bit tough. Now LS stuff is straight up cookbook, real easy to do. LTs, the things I like about the LT4 is bang for the buck. It's a great motor. It goes right in the Detroit Speed subframe pretty well. Holley's came up with some good accessory drive pieces to make it work. The biggest hassle is if you run a wet sump, you're notching their subframe tiles in the wrong spot. You did it for the LS7, so we had to make a new spot for the drain plug.
Yeah.
And you got to notch the frame a little bit for the AC compressor. But, I'd be really tempted to try and find a crashed ZL1, take the LT4 10-speed auto and transfer that whole thing into a 69 Camaro. Would be a killer package. So I actually was thinking about doing that on one of my builds, and then I decided to go to LT5. The LT5 thing, the problem with that is it's a unicorn. It's a 1-year only motor, and they're really cool. They're a good bang for the buck, but they're not going to have the support that like an LS9 or LS7 or any of that stuff ever had. So I don't know if the answer is a question or not, but that's kind of my opinion. I think bang for the buck right now, LT4, I did a small tune on that in my green car. Kyle, you chased me around Gingerman. That car hauled ass pretty good.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, very fast.
Just for a straight up crate motor, it runs pretty good.
Yeah.
So there's another question here. This one's from Scott Mock, who we know pretty well. He's a great customer of ours. He says the $1 million question: who is the better driver?
I don't think anybody's going to give on that. I looked up to Mark in college. Mark, he was a good open wheel driver. He went to some open wheel schools, I remember. And Mark's his strength, I think, has always been on the road courses. And then we started autocrossing more, and you never count him out. He he drove our Mustang fastback one weekend up at where were we at? Tire Rack test track, right? And and jumped in the car and just like he had always been driving it. So I don't know that we've ever had face off in equal cars. We've chased each other in similar cars, but Mark's an engine guy. He always knows how to build a bigger, better engine sometimes.
So my key to success is always bring more horsepower than Kyle. So I'd say we're right on par with each other. I'd love to go out and run a spec Miata race against Kyle. I would run inches away from him because I really trust him. Because recently we had an opportunity to run against each other at Gingerman, and it was on like race day. We were like really tight, and I had a blast doing that. I mean, it was because I have a ton of trust for Kyle, and I think Kyle kind of trusts me, so we were really tight, and I had a good time.
No, likewise it is. I had Dukes of Hazzard playing in my helmet the whole time music. I think that's what got me going, you know. But yeah, no, we've chased each other a lot and done a lot of dumb things together, and we know we're not either one of us are afraid of much, so we have to respect that. But Mark's a good shoe.
And I noticed,
and Kyle, you start. Go ahead.
What's that, Mark?
Oh, you put that fire out that one time. I caught on fire at Gingerman, and you and I both rolled up on it and put out Brian Thompson's Corvette. Like, that's right. You and I had that car, the fire out before I think the fire guy had his pants on, so it was pretty quick.
That's because we have experience catching things on fire. But that was also another college roommate driving that car. That Dave Michaels was driving that car.
Yeah. So anyway, got another question?
So Mark, I noticed going through that slideshow you sent to me, there's a lot of footage and photos from Nurburgring. So is that a track that you frequented? Do you run there often?
So that was one of my, it was a bucket list thing I got to do at GM. I was able to, so back up a little bit. So most of the OEs in the industry go to test at the Nurburgring during what they call industry pool days. So 16 weeks out of the year are industry pool weeks. And to be able to qualify to drive during industry pool weeks, you need to be able to go over there and certify to do that. So I worked for HPVO, High Performance Vehicle Operations. We were certifying our cars at the Nurburgring. So I got an opportunity to go over and certify and test and drive at the Nurburgring. And a good friend of mine and I did it together, the driver training, and we did it in a 38-degree day when it was sleeting and snowing. And I honestly say I was the most scared to death I've ever been in my entire life. But the place is, it's 12.7 miles around, 1,000 foot of elevation change, and you go airborne in 3 places. And I've got about 900 laps around there now. So the last car I took over there was the Camaro Z28, and I was able to, we did 2 development trips in the Z28, and I was able to get down to a 740 lap time with a passenger, which is moving along pretty quick. So it's definitely, I mean, I'm extremely fortunate I got to do that, and it was an awesome experience.
Definitely. That definitely sounds like bucket list stuff. So that's pretty cool. But yeah, I had that question for you. I saw it browsing through there and I was curious, but that's awesome. And definitely if you have 900 laps around the Nurburgring, that's definitely a good note to your driver's skill, because that is one of the scariest tracks on the earth.
I got a fun story for the Nurburgring while we're kind of telling stories. So I was over there in the Z28, and the car was I was getting pretty well sorted out. And I was coming at the Nurburgring. There's a small section, if you've ever driven the game, where there's like a short straightaway up by the start-finish line. So you need to go through there slow, and the timed laps are actually on the either end of that little straightaway. So I'm coming through there pretty slow. My tires are hot, the car's warm, and I'm getting ready to dive down to the hill on the track. And there was a new GT40, new Porsche GT3 just coming on the track. So I was in front of him. He was behind me, but he was on cold tires. I was on worn tires. So we take off, and about the time we get to here at Flute Plots, where the picture you're showing here is what they call Flute Plots, which is called the flying place in Germany. So he was starting to catch me about there. And then we had pretty much a dogfight all the way around to the carousel. And it's one of those memories at my retirement party I'll tell. And it was fantastic. I ran into the guy later at the gas pumps, and he gave me a thumbs up, which is kind of the universal sign. Like, that was pretty cool. But we were as tight as Kyle and I were going through different sections of the track. With 2 OE guys just, being guys. It was fun.
That's awesome.
But that hill,
so
they flattened that hill out now. You can't get quite as much. They flattened that rise out there. You can't get as much air across Flute Plots anymore. But anyway, next question.
So I see there were a few questions that were brought up about the mule. You kind of want to talk about what the mule was and how both of you worked together on that, you know, what Kyle had done, what you had done, and just what was the mule to you?
Well, I can start off, Kyle, if you want me to.
Yeah.
The mule, you know, was I kind of always wanted I wanted to do another 69 Camaro, and it's funny, all those cars kind of get based off of a tire size. So the Viper had a 335 in the back and a 275 on the front, and I really wanted to package those tires up. So I designed and built a 4-link rear suspension to try to get that tire in the back. And I think I talked to Kyle a number of times about torque arm, 4-link, you know, what's the best way to go for rear suspension, leaf springs. So we kind of ended up on the 4-link, which is similar to what Kyle's selling now. It's close. And then the front suspension was a first aftermarket sub by a company called Art Morrison. And then I was working out of my 2.5 car garage in Beverly Hills at the time. So we built a ton of parts on that car.
Yeah, I think it's one of those, again, iconic cars, you know, that'll go down in history of the Pro Touring and 69 Camaros, all of yours. But I mean, that was one that really started to up the game, I think, overall, not just powertrain, but overall the quality. I mean, everything throughout the car, front bumper to back, you know, rear bumper. It was really a neat car and ahead of its time at that time too.
And the fun thing about that project was Cameron Evans was the editor of Popular Hot Rodding at the time, and we did it as a monthly installment on the buildup, and that ended up being 22 consecutive installments in Popular Hot Rodding, like the longest car build ever in a magazine. And then we just took all those stories and put them together in a book, that book you just had up. So it's part of the reason that book exists was, you know, all the tech stories were written and all the photos were taken. And the first prototype steel dash for Detroit Speed was done on that car. The first prototype windshield wiper motor for Detroit Speed was done on that car. So it was, you know, a little bit of a blend of Kyle and I in that thing.
I still love that shot of your 2-car garage there, where a lot of cars were built out of that place in Beverly Hills.
Yep. So that was yeah. So I upsized the shop a little bit now. I live in Milford, Michigan, but yeah, we built a lot of cars there.
So when was the mule built?
It would have been
2002 to 2003 time frame.
Yeah, it was, because we had the car at the shop in the backyard early on, so it would have been 02, 03 time frame. Yeah.
Yep. Then I sold it to Charlie Lillard, and then I had a naturally aspirated 400 small block in it. Then when Charlie learned it, twin turbocharged. So wheel to wheel ended up twin turbocharging that car. If you go back one slide, that car was also in a BFG national ad campaign. So there's the original rendering they did for the car, and there's the magazine flyer. The other fun thing about that car was that it sat in GM Design Dome when they were designing the 5th gen Camaro. So actually that car sat in the Design Dome as an inspiration for the 5th gen Camaro that GM did.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yeah.
Really? That's cool.
Yeah. As a reference and kind of influence, right?
Then they printed out a 1-to-1 full-scale poster of that car, and I have it hanging in my shop here in Beverly Hills. So that big poster was hanging in GM Design Dome.
Yeah, it's neat.
And these are the pictures when Wheel to Wheel redid the twin turbo setup. They made like 1,000. Some open track day pictures. I got black flagged, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I did get black flagged.
So you said it was making 1,000 horsepower, and that was early 2000s making 1,000 horsepower?
Yeah, that was probably circa 2004 or 5. We made 1,000. And, you know, it was a solid 1,000. I forget the boost level. Kurt Urban built the motor. rock solid piece. It was fantastic. Oh, there it is. There it is in design.
There it is in the design studio. Yeah.
So that's Al Oppenheiser standing right at the peak of the hood. Mark Royce's center frame of the picture there. So that's in design staff.
So this is not a 69 Camaro. What do we have here? Because that's what everyone knows you for building.
Yeah, so I decided to do something a little bit different. So I did a 64 Chevelle, and that was another twin turbo project. And, you know, it was a lot of fun. It was, you know, body on frame cars are solid. They ride nice. And it was a pretty, I learned a lot doing it.
Where's that car at now, Mark?
So I sold that car to Charlie Lillard. Then Charlie Lillard sold it to Jody Bernard. Jody Bernard took the Gen 1 small block out and put an LS base motor in it, painted it charcoal gray, changed the wheels, and pretty much changed everything on the car. So it was much nicer when Jody got done with it, but it was a totally different car.
Yeah, and Jody still has it.
It's sold at some auction. I don't know who owns it now. That's the one car I've lost track of.
Okay. Yeah.
So Mark, here's a good question here from Dave Kelly. He wants to know, when you build a car, is it spoken for and sold, or is it just something that you have the inspiration to build and then you eventually sell it? So how do you operate when it comes to building cars?
So I'm kind of an idiot. I always build the car like I'm going to keep it forever, and I do a lot of things that I want done on the car. And I never really have a customer in mind when I build it. It's just, you know, I build it the way I want it built, and I tend to over harden my cars. I buy a lot of parts and do a lot of things that are really kind of, you know, if you were just building cars to flip, you wouldn't do. So like the Blazer I just did, I went through and put all 2019 Tahoe brakes and booster and all that stuff in it, and ended up selling it. The guy that bought it doesn't care, but it was important to me to get the suspension sorted out and the brakes and all that kind of stuff. So I build the car I want to build, and then I have attention deficit disorder. I want to do something else. So I sell that car to fund the next car. And I've kind of, starting off since, you know, Kyle and I had known each other, I kind of build a car, sell it, build a little bit better car, sell it, build a little bit better car. And, you know, right now I don't have a running car. I built and sold all the cars through the years to finance the next one. But I think that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm trying to pull up your Blazer here so people can see that as well.
But I've been fortunate. There's been one guy that's bought 5 of my cars, and I told him once he got past 3, he was a collector. So it's nice to go to his place and see him, because their time capsules are exactly the way I built them. So
yeah, he's also a good steward of those. So that's good that he has them.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the old Blazer.
And that one actually has our new wiper kit in it too.
Yep, wipers work great. I drove that thing on the Good Guys Hall of Fame tour, 2,600 miles in a week, and used the wipers a lot. Worked flawlessly.
Awesome. Let's see what else we have here for questions. So this one will kind of bring you guys back to your college days. I lost it. Where did it go? I know someone had asked, in college, were you guys party animals?
No, I wouldn't really classify us as party animals. We drink a lot of beer, talking about a lot of different parts and cars we built and worked on. But when we were at the race shop building the Formula SAE cars, I mean, there was no time. It was either school, work in the machine shop, building the car, designing the car, building the car, or testing it. And probably Saturday nights was about the only time we cut loose, but that was well after midnight, after we'd left the shop. Yep.
Yeah. So where Kyle and I went to school used to be Missouri School of Mines, and when we went there, it was the Missouri School of No Women. And so all we really had to do was, like, we worked on the Formula SAE car, and then about midnight, 12 o'clock in the morning, we'd have like 1 or 2 beers, and then we were out. And then go to sleep, and do it again the next morning. So it was pretty engineering school. I found it hard. You know, it was all consuming. I would not want to do it again, but I learned a lot, and I'm glad I did it.
Yeah, I mean, Rolla was not easy. I mean, it was a good school. We both learned a lot and got through it, but you're right. What we probably put ourselves through to do the SAE and Formula SAE on top of engineering school there, it was a grind. It was a tough deal.
Yeah, and both myself and Kyle were both the team captains of our college cars. So you had to design the car, you had to recruit the people, you had to run the budget, you had to deal with the BS of whatever else was going on. So on top of your regular school load, you had this huge project and that you were responsible for. So, but deeply satisfying. I'm glad I did it, and it's still one of my favorite memories.
Yeah, well, we experimented a lot with a lot of different things. We had a wind tunnel, just a side note, a lot of these things come back, but remember we had a wind tunnel in the mechanical engineering lab there, and we didn't use it for the race cars much. We thought about ways to use a scale model, which we'd talked about, but we also put somebody's dog in it one night. One of my roommate's dogs. We wanted to see at what level the ears would start to elevate, and the dog wasn't the same afterward. We didn't hurt it at all. But,
when he got out of the tunnel, he wouldn't come to us anymore.
He had a big treat anyway. He was fine.
I think that was the same night we were doing mountain bike races through the shop, and somebody eventually hit the Bridgeport. And
yeah, there was a few emergency room trips out of that machine shop, and if the school only knew.
Yeah, I got to meet Dean Armorly a lot on the damages we did on the shop over the weekend. Remember that? Did you ever get called into Dean Armorly's office?
I did, but you were my. You kind of broke the ice for him. He was softened up after you. I remember there was a couple of tools that we didn't have access to, but they only padlocked it, right? So Friday night after they left, we would cut the padlock, and then we'd weld it back together with a TIG welder and polish the lock back on Sunday nights. You got to do what you got to do.
That's right.
So, Kyle, here's a question for you from Brian Pico. He wants to know, is there any chance you will resurrect Southern Slam at CMP?
Yes, we need to. Carolina Motorsports Park, under new ownership, and great place. It's not far from here. We go down there and test a lot. And we did, several years ago, we had the Southern Slam, and it was just a great weekend. Road course, all you wanted to do, more than you wanted to do sometimes one day, and then track cross, autocross the next day. And we had a big, like a low country boil that we did that night, and just a big hangout. And a lot of people remember that. We had a great turnout, and we definitely want to bring that back. We've talked about it, and maybe next year when the world's a little more, hopefully back to normal, we can plan that and invite everybody down to Kershaw, South Carolina.
Yeah, I think the new ownership, they're making a lot of track modifications, and I think they're redoing the surface down there, which is definitely
repaving it. Yeah,
that's a deal breaker there. Definitely have a brand new surface. So
it would be great. Yeah, so stay in touch, Brian, and we do bring that up. We do get requests for that, and we would like to bring it back and bring all our car friends out and have a good time again.
What time of year is that, Kyle?
We did that in the spring, and again, we'll just have to look at it and see when we can schedule it. It won't be this year, of course, but we'll have to see if we can pull it up again next year.
That'd be fun.
Yeah, you'll get an invite.
All right, thanks, man.
So, question for the both of you guys: would you ever run one lap again?
Oh yeah, I would. It probably hurts more now that we're older, but that's a good time.
Yeah, my wife said that we had to do it together, and I told her our relationship wasn't that strong. So, so yeah, I think it'd be fun to do it again. It'd be funner if you could get a few guys and muscle cars to do it, because there's a kind of a camaraderie to doing it. And back when Kyle and I were doing it in the 90s, it was a real unicorn kind of thing to bring an old muscle car to one of those deals. So that was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Well, on top of that, Baker did it. One lifelong friend of Mark's from Kansas City did it with us one year, and I remember we'd stop in the middle of the night to get gas somewhere and check out the latest noise that we heard in the car. And Tom was a womanizer, so every time we got in the car, we always just looked to make sure Tom was in the car and wasn't trying to get in with some other girls at the gas stop. So it was always entertaining that whole trip, that whole week.
But 2 years later, he left me, and he hooked up with this girl, a carload of girls. Like, he was gone. Like, he didn't take his leg over the night. He jumped in some other car with a mission, didn't get it done. And, but yeah, that was one lap was, the great thing about One Lap of America is, as a young driver and as a young guy, I got to drive tracks all over the continental United States. So when I started talking to people, like, hey, have you ever driven Road America? Yep, been to Road America, Road Atlanta, just about most every track in the United States I've hit, one way or the other. And a lot of that was one lap.
Right.
And today it's a lot easier because you can go online, watch YouTube videos, figure out the line. But, I remember showing up at Howard, Oklahoma, never been there before in my life. I had some track notes from Sports Car Magazine, and I was trying to figure it out. And Hurley Hayward and I had the track notes on the deck lid of his Porsche, trying to figure out the line around Howard, Oklahoma, which is like, those are just great memories that all, it was just pretty funny.
So if you two were to do one lap today, what would you drive?
It'll have to be an old Camaro, I guess. It'd be easier to do it in something newer, probably. But like Mark said, I think there's more. It's just more challenging. When you leave, and it's not so much today in today's cars that Mark's building or we're building in the shop. But back then, we wondered if we could go to the parts store and back without breaking down, let alone drive across the country and bonsai around 2 road courses a day and drive all night. There was always that allure, like the challenge. Hey, you think we're going to make it? So, and somewhat there's still a challenge with that. There's no nanny switches in a old Camaro or in an old muscle car to do that. And I think, like Mark said, there's just more of an allure of people cheering you on too to do it in a vintage car.
I don't know about you, Kyle, but when back in those days, when you do the 4 or 5 shift, I never forget it. Like, when you do the 4 or 5 shift, it was 128 miles an hour, and the world always got kind of quiet, and the car just kind of got up on its toes and started floating around, and every time just always slowed down for me back in those days. And you're just like, it's just scary. Like, you just didn't know what was going to happen. Now we do it all the time, but back then it was pretty frightening. And before your wiper kits, the old 69 Camaro was a stock wiper. The wipers would blow on at about 135. So once you got above 135, the wipers would start dancing, then they'd start going. And once you got below 135, they'd settle down and park, like every lap. So another speedo.
Right, I remember that.
But I'd like to do it again. I think this car I'm building right now would make it no problem. But it's having air, having the car's pretty well sorted, all the Detroit Speed chassis, that stuff you don't have to worry about breaking. So I wouldn't be it'd be tough, but not as hard.
Yeah. I don't know, Mark, when I remember that summer, I think I was 21, we were doing one lap, and the 4 or 5 shift always to me was not to hit 4 reverse instead of 4 or 5. Because I knew the long way to go, and we probably needed to reverse sometime that night.
Yeah. So, and then one lap now, is not quite as hardcore because overnight sections now I don't think are as long. Back in the 90s, you would finish at MIS at night, and then the next morning you'd be racing Sebring. So you'd literally drive that far overnight. I don't think they do the legs quite that long anymore.
Right.
Which would be fine. Getting a little sleep would be fine.
Right.
So here's a question here from Clint Judd, and I know Steve Rupp is he was watching at one point. I'm sure he's probably still on here, but he wants to know, what would you advise Steve to do on tri-tip? What updates would you like to see on that car to kind of bring it into what Pro Touring cars are today?
I think he's going to change out the front spindles to a bearing style and change the brakes. Everything else about the car, it was at Kyle's car a few years back and Posey's shop. So I don't know all the history where that car stands right now. I know a lot of things were changed at Kyle's old shop in Brighton that made the car pretty good. And I'd have to go and, to be honest with you, I have to go and look at the car and kind of see where it's at right now. But in general, the car worked pretty good.
It did, and I think the car just has that look. So I don't think Steve's planning on changing it from that look, because that car's known for the way it is, the way it looks, the way it sits, and I know even to keep the engine and that powertrain configuration, and I think he wants to keep it pretty true to form to that time in history.
Let's see what else we have on here. I think this one will this is a question I'm going to ask for the both of you. What's your favorite driving memory? Something that you've done together, whether it's racing or a road trip. What's your favorite memory with the car?
There's several that come to mind.
Yeah.
But,
you want to go first, Kyle?
Yeah, I think probably that summer in the tri-tip, in '93 when we were doing one lap and doing so many things with the car that summer. The not so favorite was Michigan International, but probably the favorite was when we won overall at Loudon, New Hampshire. It was a spooky time. We'd never been there. I'd never been there before. And it was very foggy and rainy. Parts of the track were puddled with water. Parts of the track were dry. A lot of elevation. We were a long way from home. If we broke down and had to get it towed back, we didn't have money to do that. So it was just, I think, probably the most nervous and uneasy strapping into the car and wanting to do good for us, because we started gridding a lot better as you were running. And at the same time, not balling it up somewhere in the northeast part of the country, so far from home. And to go from that level to being on top when we left the track, we just couldn't believe it. I mean, we were high-fiving and double-checking the stats again when we went up to look at the grid line that we had won at Loudon. That was probably one of my favorites, was that week on one lap and the highs and lows of that week.
Yeah, for me, I mean, a little bit later, when things got a little more mature, in 2010, the Optima Ultimate Street Car Shootout, Kyle was there, I was there, and I was able to win that event in 2010. And the cool thing was that was a brand new car. We got to SEMA, we ran that deal, and the fact that my mom and dad were there also was really, for me, of all the car stuff I've done in my career, that was probably my highlight, was the fact that it all came together. We didn't break it, and the car ran pretty good. Got through all the events.
Yeah.
So,
which car was that?
That was a Red Devil. So that was 2010. The car was brand new that year. Well, pretty new. It's only been together for a few months, and Dutch boys painted it and had all Detroit Speed chassis in it, and that car did a lot of good stuff. That was a good car.
Damn, I'm trying to pull up a picture of it I have here.
Yeah, that right there.
Yeah, that was fast. That was a fast car.
So what was the power plant on that car?
That had a 7-liter Brian Thompson LS9 in it. Made a little over 800, probably like 870 horse, somewhere in there. And that was a prototype ABS system on it. And I think you were there, Kyle. I think my commitment level was fairly high that day.
Yeah, it was. A good day overall.
Yeah. So didn't break it. And I think your name's on there. I forget where I think you ended up second that year. Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah, it's in the lower right of that picture.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a good year.
Yeah. So that was good. And then also, kind of back what Kyle was talking about, after we cut the white car on the fired tri-tip, the fact that he and I drove it down to Carcraft Real Street Eliminator with the only car that came in there, not on a trailer. We drove it in. We get out of the car. We get all the McDonald's wrappers out of it, get the car all cleaned up. And, Kyle and I proceeded just to kick butt that whole weekend. Then at the end of the deal, we drove the car home. So to me, that was, truly great hot rodding and a great weekend. I'll never forget it.
Right. I agree.
So why 1969 Camaro? I mean, that seems to be a very popular platform with you. A lot of the cars you build are 1969 Camaros. And even for a question for both of you, just why Camaros in general? What is the connection? What made you want to choose, the Camaro over any other platform that's available?
I can tell you, for me, it was, I always, from grew up racing and car minded. I love the Penske Donahue cars, and the '69 Sunoco Penske Donahue car to me was the real deal, and that was the car that I wanted to have. I looked up to, still do, Roger Penske and what Mark Donahue did as an engineer and a driver, and just loved the car and what they did with those cars in the Trans Am series, and wanted to make the Camaro, the '69 Camaro. I wanted my own version of that, and I think that's what kind of got Mark started too, was bringing the later model technology and build details into those cars. But that's the car that started it for me.
Yeah, for me, actually, I was a big Mustang guy before I got hired into GM, and I actually drove a '66 Mustang Fastback to Detroit for my first summer internship. And I decided I needed to get a Chevy product if I was going to work for GM. So I looked at all the different cars, and I really settled in on like the '69 Camaro RS. And I bought one in Van Nuys, California, and that was that white car with the black vinyl top. And they were always just the right size car with the right wheelbase. And then later on, and they were kind of an approachable car back when we first started. Yeah, that's that white car with the black vinyl top. So that's the '65 Fastback. '66 Fastback I drove to Detroit, and that's the car I bought. But even when we raced the cars on one lap of America, we'd stop at a gas station, and everybody's like, they had one, they used to have one. Everybody had a story about a '69 Camaro. So really approachable car. I've always loved them, and it's really unfortunate they've gotten so expensive, but I understand why. They're just great cars.
So when you were speaking about Red Devil, you had mentioned it was a prototype ABS system. And another question that we received in the chat is there any plans for, kind of a more budget-friendly ABS system for the pro touring market? Is that something that you would consider, or have you found any tips or tricks to how to make other ABS systems work in classic cars?
Kyle and I have talked about that one a bunch, and it's complicated because if everybody would stick to all Detroit Speed chassis bits, it would be not that hard to do. But everybody, like you guys know, everybody builds a unicorn. Everybody's got like a little bit of a snowflake, and it's almost, the ABS cowl is like an engine cowl to a certain deal. It has to be tuned to the system, and once you get off of that kind of base system, then you move yourself into something like a Bosch Motorsport system where it has that open flexibility like a standalone ECM does to tune your engine. So, the engine cowl stuff became economical because a lot of people did it. The ABS stuff is hard and complicated because the market's fairly small, and you got to have a lot of different specialized pieces. So I don't know about you, Kyle, but that's kind of my read on it.
It is. It's a tough one to do, just from all the combinations you can put together in the aftermarket. You're right. There's still some things brewing and going on out there that it may get easier or could come together for the aftermarket, but always the legality side of it too. Even though we're making muscle cars safer than they ever were before, we're also putting a lot more tire and a lot more power to them too. But I'm a fan of it. Hopefully we could do it. But you're right. It's a lot of different options to choose from to try and coordinate it and make it one cowl.
That's a pretty good answer to that one there. So Mark, once you wrap up your current 1969 Camaro project, what do you think's next for you?
So I've been looking at old Jeeps. I had so much fun building the Blazer. I'm going to probably do another some sort of SUV just to bang around in, and so that's probably what I'm going to build next for myself. Had a blast doing that, and so it's probably, and after that I'm not sure. So these, it's funny. Each one of these projects takes about 2.5, 3 years, and it's like it's a lot of effort. Every one of them. Kyle knows, like it's
harder each one.
Yeah. A good friend of mine, Jack Chisenhall, owns Vintage Air Conditioning. He'd always say, well, it looks like there's enough pain in that project to make it worthwhile.
What about you, Kyle? What would you like to build next?
I'm really excited, and I daydream when I get to daydream about my '79 Chevy ramp truck. I still want to build the ramp truck to haul one of the cars to track days or wherever. So I'm excited and still daydream about building it. That's one on the list. And 61 Biscayne would be fun to do. I've always liked the full body cars, and still a long list of cars. Something to go to Bonneville still is something I'd like to do. So yeah, there's still a lot of projects left, and hopefully we can get around to them and do some more.
I forgot about the ramp truck. I forgot you had that. Let's see. What about any personal projects, something that isn't a DSE test car? Is there something else that you have that you want to work on?
I've always got house projects, but Mark, you're in a pretty good spot. You've been in your house for a while, so you should have to-do list almost done, right?
Geez, like we've been here for 6 years, and it's just keep on picking away at stuff. So you've been here still doing house projects, and like I look at my old Bridgeport, I'm like, I should probably restore that. It's low on the priority list. So
right.
I tend to kind of like gravitate towards. My wife will come out sometimes, and I'm just organizing I got all these list of cabinets, so I just go through and I organize all my junk. And she's like, why do you do that? Like, well, I can drink a beer and I can sort bolts, and it just relaxes me. So sometimes you just want to do simple, mindless tasks, and it works out pretty well.
Yeah, still good garage time.
Yep.
I think we're getting close. Do you have any more questions, Alex?
Let me see. I think we addressed a lot of the major pro touring ones. There's a couple that are a little more GM related. Mark wants to touch on them, but Ron Preston wants to know, do you have any experience or thoughts on the C8 Corvette?
I've driven it on track. Actually, I've only driven it on the street once, but I've driven it quite a bit on the racetrack. And it's interesting because it's got 58% rear weight off memory. So when you really start hustling the car, you can start feeling, you pick up on the mid-engine of it pretty quick. And then there's this one turn on our track at work called, it went in the high-speed S's. It's usually, you come in like in a C7 Z06. I usually come in there at about 135 miles an hour, about 1.2 lateral. And so I was starting to play with that in the mid-engine Corvette. And eventually I wanted to find the point where it would snap, and I finally got it to kind of snap oversteer. So now you got a car going really, really fast, quite a little bit of weight on the back, and you need to be cognizant to stay on the power, because you need to keep the weight transferred back on the rear tires and keep it going. So I think, the C8 is going to be a great platform. And the funny thing is, like, you see all these articles and they're comparing it to the C7, Z06, or ZR1. And you got to understand, like, the car that's out right now is the skinny tire first car. And there's going to be better cars coming. So everybody's like, well, it's not that fast. I'm like, well, this is the first one. And if you look at C5 had the base car, then they had the Z06. C6 had the base car, then the Z06 and the ZR1. C7 had the base car, then they had the Grand Sport, then they had the Z06 and the ZR1. So if past performance is the best indication of future performance, statistically speaking, we're going to do some other stuff.
Right.
So it's going to be, it's going to be an interesting car. The aftermarket's going to bump into cybersecurity and for all the controllers. So that's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a lot harder to crack into it than the current cars. So the things I've been reading, the people, some friends of mine that have bought them and they've been beating on them pretty good. They're hanging together. So it's early days in the development, and I think it's going to be a great platform.
Cool. That's a great insight there. And we are wrapping up on time, but there's one last question I want to get in, kind of as a good closer. So Brandon Wiedemann, a good friend of the company and a great customer, he says, where do you see the pendulum swing on the race car versus street car spectrum in the coming years? It seems like for a number of years it has swung pretty far towards race car, but I feel like it may be shifting back towards street car. So what is your opinion on, race car versus street car nowadays and what people are building?
I've got some thoughts on that. I mean, Mark, you're probably similar. You know, it's Mark and I talk about this. It's hard to beat the physics of somebody that knows how to drive, set up a car like a C5 to C8 Corvette. Competitively, what we have to run from vintage cars to run what you brung at some of today's events, you know, track day events. Physics are against an older car beating a guy that shows up or a gal that knows how to drive, knows how to prep it, get around the track in a well-sorted, say, Corvette. It doesn't have to be a Corvette. I mean, Porsche, a lot of different cars, but it's hard to beat those cars with what we have to compete with now. So the vintage cars can run very fast. They've come a long way. They're still coming a long way. But the physics of it is it's hard to beat somebody that shows up with all the boxes checked and that toolbox ready to go. So to me, I think it is, Brandon, shifting a little bit back to the street market and more interest in the performance street of that versatile car like Pro Touring did, you know, 30 years ago almost. But to me, the competitive side will always do that. It always goes through that cycle. You start honest with a given set of rules for the first year through maybe the first 5 or 6 years. And then, you know, today's tires, today's powertrains, the brakes, that elevates so fast that it gets so competitive. The physics at some point get against you. So I'm not making excuses for the vintage guys. There's plenty of fast cars and new cars being built that I know of to go fast. But I do see that swing of maybe some more performance street cars until maybe there's a new level of track day events we can all go to.
Yeah, I echo what Kyle says. It's just, I think people have kind of started building like, this is going to be my cruiser car and I'm going to build a track car. So, because,
right,
you know, it's really hard to build a really fast car that does it all. And, you know, and my cars eat parts, Kyle's cars eat parts. I mean, when I would take a car like Hellfire to an open track day, if I'd run 4 20-minute sessions in that car, I'd kill a set of tires and I'd kill a half a set of brake pads. And pretty soon you're thinking, I should just build a track car that's lighter and doesn't eat as much parts.
right.
So, I still love taking my cars to open track days. I mean, I became friends with the Shelby Club up here, and I go do a Shelby Club open track day, and it's a blast. I meet a lot of great people. I do it more for the social portion of it, and I've had a lot of fun just going to various open track days, non-competition stuff up around here in Michigan.
Perfect. That's a great insight to kind of where the industry is headed, and it's great to have your thoughts involved in that as well. So that pretty much wraps up today's talk. Thank you, Mark, for joining us, and it was a lot of great conversation. You know, some stories that people have never heard before. So, you know, again, thank you for coming on and talking. And pretty much that's it. That's the wrap of the show, and I hope you have enjoyed it. And we also want you to stay tuned to our social media tonight. And if you're subscribed to our newsletter, you'll be getting an email as well. But we are having a Memorial Day sale this weekend, so we will have details to come. So make sure you stay tuned to social. If you're not subscribed to our newsletter, it's at the top of our website. So go ahead and make sure you're wrapped in there. And we'll have an announcement on a Memorial Day sale. So if you guys are looking to get some parts, if you've been quarantined for a while, you need some projects to do on your car, give us a call, and we'll get you sorted out. So thank you guys for joining today. It was a great talk, and thank you guys for coming in and, you know, being part of the chat and asking some great questions. So we hope you guys have a great day.
Thank you all, and thank you, Mark.
Thanks, Kyle. Good seeing you.
Yeah, you too, man.
Bye.